The problem with Pirates of the Caribbean is that it relies on the presence of one Captain Jack Sparrow, a character who began as a supporting player in the original film, but who quickly became the main character of the series. People tend to forget that aspect. Spoilers ahoy, by the way. In the first 3 films, Jack of course carries with him plenty of importance, but he's secondary to Will and Elizabeth and their whole romance. Once they were gone and the series moved on, it did so by replacing them with Jack in both On Stranger Tides and Dead Men Tell No Tales, even if the latter film does have Will and Elizabeth in very minor roles, and borderline clones of them in the supposed lead roles. Make no mistake, those last 2 were Captain Jack movies through and through, and for that they suffered by simply not utilizing Jack in the way he was meant to be utilized, as a strong supporting character. One of the significant issues plaguing the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, particularly as it progressed, is its increasingly convoluted and even nonsensical mythology. This problem is intrinsically linked to the over-reliance on the character of Captain Jack Sparrow. Take, for instance, the opening act of At World's End. The extended sequence depicting Jack Sparrow's bizarre predicament in Davy Jones' locker is a prime example of this issue. While these moments might offer fleeting amusement to some viewers, they significantly disrupt the film's pacing and narrative coherence. It often feels as though director Gore Verbinski and the creative team were explicitly instructed by studio executives to amplify the presence and eccentricities of Jack Sparrow, even at the expense of a more streamlined and comprehensible storyline. The result is a film, and indeed a franchise, where the intricate and often perplexing lore becomes entangled with the exaggerated antics of its central, albeit increasingly overexposed character. This ultimately detracts from the overall narrative impact and viewer engagement. The tangled web of mythology and the overabundance of Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean sequels are a heavy anchor for the ship to try and steer away from. Or something, I'm not a boat guy. Actually, let's step back a bit. Much like my last few sentences, all of At World's End is a bit of a convoluted mess. Let's be real, as much as I enjoy it, that thing is all over the place. Character motivations are convoluted, the action sequences are convoluted, the mythology is convoluted. If there's a theme to At World's End, it's
convolution.
I mean that and freedom versus order, identity and transformation, sacrifice and redemption, love transcending death, and the overall end of an era symbolized by corporate and government forces systematically destroying the age of piracy. So yeah, convolution. Add to all that, there's a certain level of diminishing returns when it comes to the spectacle of the series. After the 1-2 punch of the Kraken and Calypso, there's not a whole lot you can show me with the same amount of wow factor. Even the villains are tough to one-up. How you gonna beat Barbossa and Davy Jones? It's an impossible task, and one neither On Stranger Tides nor Dead Men Tell No Tales can really measure up to. If I really wanted to nitpick this franchise, I'd also have to bring up the romanticization of the golden age of piracy, which largely glosses over the historical realities of colonialism, slavery, and violence that defined the Caribbean of this era. There's a certain uncomfortable disconnect between the fantasy of the Pirates of the Caribbean world and its real-world implications. We get the East India Company as secondary villains, of course, but very little attention is given to their real-world villainy. Now, having said all that, I'm going to go on and get ahead of the comments here and just admit that the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise is really successful at being a silly swashbuckling adventure spectacle. Heck, I even enjoyed Dead Men Tell No Tales, and I consider Dead Man's Chest and At World's End to be classic American blockbusters. Sure, they have their faults, but that can be said of pretty much any big Hollywood production. What they bring to the table is massive, borderline impossible to imagine visual effects that still hold up nearly 20 years later. Oddly enough, the same can't be said for the near-perfect Curse of the Black Pearl, which hadn't quite achieved the same level of CGI wizardry. Still cool, though. And gosh, come to think of it, those 2 sequels came out in 2006 and 2007, so not only do I feel like an old codger just talking about them as someone who was there for the original theatrical run, but in the context of when they came out, they're really all the more impressive to look at. Sure, they get up their own butt a bit, and they're a smidge too long, but as a showcase for how far cinema had come in terms of big visual effects bonanzas, they succeed in spades. Therein lies another issue, though. As Hollywood has evolved, it has also devolved in certain respects. No longer are we getting movies from Disney that are technical marvels, even in the literal Marvel movies. There's a distance that's grown over time between the House of Mouse and any attempt to put on a visually dynamic or progressive feast for the eyes, which the Pirates movies arguably do very well. That's not to say that modern Disney movies aren't nice to look at or that the CGI isn't impressive at times, but we've entered a new digital age that looks nothing like those initial 3 films. I think part of that is down to not just the CGI, but also the fact that there is a ton of practical production design that went into the initial Pirates films that simply isn't utilized as much in modern Hollywood productions. Point being, while Pirates of the Caribbean is a ridiculous and overstuffed franchise with a poor grasp on its own success, it's still a lot of fun and deserves to be remembered as a pinnacle of big-budget Hollywood filmmaking. At the very least, the original trilogy stands out as a classic endeavor into the realm of mainstream filmmaking, while the latter 2 sequels coast by as enjoyable enough also-rans. If I may return to the start of this video though, there is one more problem with Captain Jack Sparrow, and that's that for all my talk of him being a supporting player, he is integral to the franchise. It's hard to imagine Pirates of the Caribbean without his presence, and as time goes on and it becomes more and more apparent that he's just not coming back, well, it begs the question of whether there's even a point to continuing the franchise. Sure, there's that rumored reboot thingy with Margot Robbie that got bandied about a while back, but it's hard to imagine it being successful without the icon himself somewhere in the cast list. With that being a borderline impossibility, though rumors do sometimes pop up suggesting otherwise, it seems like just a bad idea and a waste of money to produce a Pirates film sans Johnny Depp. So yeah, it's funny, but the thing that's most memorable about the franchise is also its Achilles heel. To make a new Pirates movie work, you need Captain Jack Sparrow. Unless you're making the other kind of Pirates movie, in which case, well, we're not gonna get into that on this channel. But what do you think? Is the franchise screwed without Captain Jack Sparrow to, well, captain it? Or is there a world where Disney returns without him and finds some level of success? Heck, beyond that, are we past the expiration date on these films? Has filmmaking become too much of a slosh pit for there to ever be something close to as grandiose as those original 3 films? Let me know in the comments what you think, and until next time, thank you for watching ScreenRant.